Welcome back to the Sacred Purpose Podcast, loves. I'm so happy to be here today with a new girlfriend of mine, Alexandra Raquel Hughes. We got to know each other recently and even been on the most exquisite retreat together. So I feel like we got to really know each other very intimately, and I feel like we just have so many threads that we could pick up on and talk about. And so I'm really excited for this conversation. She's so full of wisdom and life experience. And I feel like in many ways, our paths have crossed and woven together. She is a feminist culture weaver. So you already know, like, that she's speaking my language, especially with everything that's happening in the world right now and the confusion around what even is a feminist and the blame that women are taking for even wanting to be independent and successful and blaming feminism for it. So I can't even go any further than that, but I'm going to finish reading her bio so you can get to know her a little bit, because she's also a ceremonial guide and the founder of Conectada, a project dedicated to restoring earth-rooted feminine leadership through sacred ceremony, ancestral healing, and embodied spiritual practices. Drawing from her Quechua and settler ancestries, as well as 2 decades of guiding women through life's transitions, Alexandra creates health spaces where women reconnect with intuition, ancestral wisdom, and the cyclical rhythms of the earth. As a trained priestess and ceremonialist, she supports soulful transformation through offerings including the 13 Moons Cyclical Living Community, private ancestral soul journeys, and bespoke sacred feminine ceremonies. Alexandra is the mother of 2 beautiful teens and 1 young adult. She lives and works in, Toronto. You spelled it differently. What is that?
So that's the indigenous name for what is now known as Toronto, which is a mouthful.
I always love to recognize, because it is such an integral part of feminine wisdom. It's where our wisdom is from this beautiful earth. And I think acknowledging those that tend and have tended the earth that we stand on is so critical to being able to maintain that bond with Mother Earth and with our feminine wisdom. So I thank you for bringing that to the show as well. And I'm so excited to just dive into conversation with you, because as a soul sister, and I just love a good chat. But I also know you're just going to bring so much wisdom to a topic that I think is really top of mind and top of heart for so many of us right now, struggling to find where we land in all the noise that's happening right now, that's seeking to divide us from our intuition, to divide us from our knowing, to divide us from people we know, and even question, what matters really the most right now in this moment. So, Alexandra, thank you so much for coming and joining me on the show today. I'd love for you to introduce yourself a little bit and tell us a little bit more about where you're at and what brought you here today.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Thanks for the beautiful introduction. I'm not sure where to begin and what to add. I suppose what's closest to my heart is, the mother piece, being a mother to the 3 kids that are not so little anymore, and transitioning from being their child mom to being their teen and then their young adult mom. Letting them go, being at a midlife threshold right now, where I'm actually stepping out of a marriage and into a whole new version of myself, it feels like. And as I do that, I get to witness and facilitate the growth of this beautiful business that, like you said, seems to have been born at a really timely moment. And the work that I do is really, there's so many words that we could use, but because the word matriarchy has just entered this, what do we call it? The zeitgeist? Is that the right word? Like this just entered many people's lexicons. I'm starting to use it as well. And I see my work as something that supports the detox of internalized patriarchy and the building of a more matriarchal relationship with ourselves, with time and with energy. And because I believe that the matriarchy needs to be built from the inside out, I see that as a starting point towards building systems and structures around us that will be regenerative and sustainable and more just than what we've got going on right now, for circling right back around for our children and their children and their children's children. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, that's really what the matriarchy is. It's the collective, it's the whole, it's life-giving, it benefits all, not just the winner takes all, but it benefits all. And I love that we get to bring that. And there are more conversations happening around it. I felt like for a long time, I was one of maybe 2 or 3 people using the word matriarchy. And it's nice, right, to have it be entered into the chat, to have it be more normalized where people might even be questioning like what is that, right? But I think sometimes when you hear a word like that, even if it sounds unfamiliar, something about it resonates deep in your bones and you think, there's something there. Let me investigate more. So I think conversations like this are really helpful for that, for giving it some context, because I think there's a lot of divisiveness around feminism right now, which we could go into that as a whole other subject, but I think defining matriarchy, the vision, I think is equally as important for some of this. And I'm curious a little bit about your journey, about what it was like what you used a word and I'm not remembering it, like liberating yourself from the patriarchy or detoxing yourself from the patriarchy, when that started to happen for you, or did it? Maybe you lived in such a way that you never felt like you had internalized it as much. I'm not even sure. I'd love to know.
My goodness, I wish.
Mm,
I'm not entirely sure if I have ever met anybody who hasn't felt at least strands and threads of internalized patriarchy inside them,
mhm.
perhaps not able to identify it, but I think it has to be there, Lisa, because we all live in this soup, right? And we don't
Mhm.
just live in this soup now, like epigenetically the cells have lived
Yeah.
in this soup for thousands of years. So, and so much so, in fact, that until very recently, we've never even questioned the soup. And the original, like the definition of feminism was defined within the context of that soup and within the value system of that soup. So for me, I was blessed. And when you shared with me and our council, your relationship with your sisters and the women in your life, like your
Mhm.
biological sisters and the women in your life and your upbringing. I was so awed by it all. And it just made so much sense because that exudes in you. The blessing of those relationships exudes in you. I do not have that kind of experience I have one sister, with my sister. However, I was raised after the age of 6 in an all women's home. My dad left and I was raised by my mom. And very soon after, my grandmother came to live with us and take care of us and my sisters. So we were 3 generations, 4 women or 2 girls, 2 women in one home.
Wow.
And so from like my memories are really, post 6, my conscious memory. And so I didn't know what a typical nuclear family was like. I'd never witnessed those dynamics. And of course, there are positive and there are negatives to that. It means that I couldn't replicate a healthy relationship a heterosexual relationship because I'd never seen one. I'd never witnessed one.
Mm,
But of course, it also meant that I'd never witnessed the toxicity of that, or at least at a conscious level. And so I remember, for instance, going to other you know, nuclear family homes, including the homes of my family in Lima, Peru, and being so shocked at the division of labor and so shocked at like the nature of communication and so shocked that, just the basic things like after dinner, women would retire to the kitchen and men would go have their drinks in the living room. Like it was I think that I became a feminist very early on
mm,
because I was so sensitive to that. And so in a way, I think that was a blessing that disallowed like the subconscious threading of the patriarchy to
mm,
root deeply in ways that maybe it has for other people who lived in heterosexual nuclear family situations where they thought that that was the way it had to be. So there's that. But I think for me, the external energies, the external dynamics, the expectations, like at the age of 6, my mother was pregnant with my younger sister, and I became a child without needs, really. because
Mm.
there was something about like making it easy for my mom. And so I became this child without needs. And I very quickly learned that in order to become that child who my mother would be proud of and my father would be proud of, I needed to take on masculine traits. So I became really good at school. Eventually I became that child who got the scholarship, who got the jobs, who was very type A, overgiving, overfunctioning, all the things. And I consider that to be like
Mm.
an internalized patriarchy, right? And I
Yeah,
was
it is.
doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. It is. You touched on something I thought was really interesting, which I felt was relevant to this conversation about when you identified the separation of roles as a young child and how that felt in your system. And what came to mind for me was a sense of justice or even a little injustice, which I think is the thing that really defines the matriarchy. It is one of the key things that defines matriarchy. It isn't dominance, it's justice. If you think about like even feminine and feminine rage, it's usually tied to an injustice that we see where we want to correct the wrongs that we've seen that exist in the world that are generally patriarchal systems and structures that are in place. And I think that we can identify those moments where even in childhood where we were a little bit like, well, that's not fair. What is that? Right. And that's our little child like thoughts around it. Whereas now we might have more context and more words around it. But it's an interesting point that I wanted to pick up because I kind of love that you were naming that at such a young age.
Yeah. Children are the best, right? At seeing the truth because we
Mm-hmm.
haven't been conditioned as much. And I think in many ways we see the truth and we question the truth. And I would ask my mom and she would just say, well, that's what it's like with your aunt and your uncle. And what's so interesting about my mother is that sometimes she'd go into the kitchen with the women and sometimes she'd go for a drink with the men. Because
Love that.
she was both. She was the breadwinner and she was also the mother. And so she was kind of able to navigate. But I remember her, in a sense, justifying it all to me. And also we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about a Peruvian, very
Right.
Catholic, conservative, macho culture, and I love my family, but that's what it was. And so I do think that there's something to be said for the innocence of a child's eyes.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I love that you hadn't been exposed to it yet, so it stands out for you as like, "This is not what I was expecting or what I'm used to." I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And these were visits that would happen, once every 2 years or once like this.
Mm,
It wasn't that I was, you know, in that context very often. There was enough distance from it for it
mhm.
to feel different.
Yeah. Interesting. So I'm curious about, you mentioned that this new body of work that you are developing and you're calling to develop it in this way right now at this time. And the way that I feel like so many women right now are starting to have this rising and this stirring of maybe it was a sense of injustice or maybe it is based on what they're seeing happening in the world. And maybe it's just something that's part of our natural evolution of what's happening to feminine energy right now and the need for the matriarchy to come together. And so I'm curious what that journey was like for you, really bringing more of that matriarchal relationship back to yourself after you did all the things as the good daughter and all the achievement and even, marriage and divorce, right? Like you and I have been around for a little bit doing this work, but for the women now that are also starting to have this rising up within them, how would you, I don't even know if we can define it, but help build that relationship with the matriarchy, the relationship with matriarchal energy within them?
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think there are different things that we can do. For me, one of the very first, I guess there were sort of two synonymous things that happened. One was
Mm-hmm.
slowing the fuck down. Like again, when you're type A and you're going for gold and you're ambitious and you want to tick all the boxes and this sort of American dream success story. For a woman, I think for everyone, but definitely for a woman who also happens to be a mother, it means hustle and grind.
Mm-hmm.
It just means go, go, go all the time. And I think that when I understood that the go, go, go was not in any way attuned to the way my body worked, and that
Yeah.
in fact I was, I was, I was trying, and I think we're all as women trying to fit into this circadian rhythm that works for a man's
Mm-hmm.
hormonal system.
Yeah.
So when I realized that that was not working for me, and I started to explore cyclical living with a woman called Kate Northrup, she was the first person to introduce me to it. It was such an eye opener for me in so many ways. First of all, that we're allowed to rest, you know, um, but more importantly, that rest and going inward has a massive return on investment for us. Like if we use patriarchal language, right? Our productivity boosts. If we actually honor the darkness and the rest, then when we are in the light, ready to present, ready to produce, it's just the darker the shadow, the brighter the light, right? So if you
Mm-hmm.
really honor
Mm-hmm.
that, then you will have the energy that you need. And so really tuning into the way your body works. Now, for me, I started this when I was still cycling. So I
Mm-hmm.
felt it so deeply in my body. And then, of course, once I'd managed and got a grasp, it's just like with kids. Once you figure out the toddler phase, they turn into something else. So
Yes.
once I
Yep.
figured out my body, then things went all wackadoodle because I stepped into perimenopause. And so then I stepped into following the moon, which of course also has the 28-day cycle.
Yeah.
And what's so beautiful about cyclical living is that it's true for just about everything that's alive. It's true for the earth and her seasons. It's true for the moon and her cycle. It's true for our bodies. It's true for a project that we're working on. You know, so
Mm-hmm.
everything has this like birth moment, which we find ourselves in right now in spring, and then this moment of culmination or orgasm or ovulation or full moonedness. And then this moment
Mm-hmm.
of like letting go, release, becoming discerning, stepping towards death. And then that moment of death and rebirth, which happens in our winters or in our dark moons or in our bleeding phase. And so these 4 phases of the cycle really allow us to explore and give us time to do that. So that's one of the big differences and changes that helped
Mm-hmm.
me to hear myself. Like if you don't have that time to stop, then you don't really have time to access the whispers within
Yeah. Yep.
and the inner wisdom, right? That lives inside of you. So taking that sacred pause was enormous, just enormous. And then the second thing I think was really beginning to stop seeing healing as an individual or like a personal and individual
Mm.
experience, you know, and starting to step into and hold circles for
Mm-hmm.
women. Because I think that, you know, this self-help world, this new age world, even, and I'm a certified coach, and even the coaching piece was like neck up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it
Mm-hmm.
was neck up and it was individual or individualistic.
Yeah.
But again, the way women have always worked is in circle with other women.
Mm-hmm.
We've always, in societies that have served us, we have had our village. And I think that once I began to embrace that, and then I'm just going to add a third piece just because I already started talking
Mm-hmm.
about it, and it's the body piece, like to go
Yeah.
beyond from the neck up and to really embrace the somatic and energetic experience of healing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'd say those were I would say that it was also in that order, that those were the 3 things that made the biggest difference for me in terms of exploring a different way of navigating time and energy
Yeah.
that, you
I
know,
love this.
and then healing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. That feels so spot on. And, before we pressed record for this interview, I shared something a little bit personal with you. Not like deeply personal, but just what happened for me today as somebody who normally does honor the cycles of the moon and tunes to it and have been doing this work for a long time. Even did a whole podcast episode myself on the importance of really allowing ourselves that pause, that sacred pause to hear ourselves, to hear our intuition and to cycle to a different rhythm, especially now when things are noisy, especially now when we're being so divided that we almost have to double down on these practices to hold us. And before we hit record, I was like, gosh, I feel so off today. My energy is everywhere. I don't know what quote unquote feels wrong. And you were like, Lisa, it's the full moon. I was like, right. I haven't even allowed myself. I got caught up in that mode of sunshine, right? That not honoring my cycle of energy and that eternal summer that we're expected to live in of just wake up and hit the ground running. And even though it's the full moon, it's very illuminated. I find that I lose my focus. I lose my juice. I lose my ability to just really function at a high level when I find myself detaching from that. And so I would love if we just took a moment here, because I know that you also have a lot of astrological wisdom. If you would just tell us, as we're recording today, it is the full moon, and you gave me a little bit more information and context about specifically the energy of this full moon, and I would love for you to just give us a little taste of it.
Sure. This is a gorgeous full moon. I'm so excited about this full moon. Before we speak to the full moon, okay, disclaimer. I'm not an astrologist. I'm an astrology junkie. So
Got it.
I can't read a chart, but I can analyze what other astrologists are telling me and kind of weave it all together. So I think, just to situate ourselves, it's important to note that the outer planets, which are further away from us, Neptune, Saturn, Uranus, Pluto, these are the planets that kind of govern more the collective activity. And the way they're situated now, and I won't go into specifics, but the way they're situated right now is an energetics that the world knows because they all cycle round. And when they were in these positions, in these transits, previously, there was the Haitian Revolution, the Civil War, the end of the coming down of the Berlin Wall. I might be getting some of this wrong, but there was major upheaval and change happening. And so it's important for us to recognize that that's the larger context, the larger energetic astrological context that we find ourselves in right now. Big, radical, transformative. The world is about to embark on some major change. And we can feel it, right?
That imprint is there.
The imprint is there. Now, what's happening right now on this full moon in Libra, and we're recording this on the 1st of April in 2026. What's happening right now is we have this beautiful full moon in Libra. So the sun is in Aries and the moon is in Libra. And so when there's a full moon, the sun and the moon are opposite one another. And the sun is obviously illuminating the moon fully. And the axis that we're working with right now is the axis between Aries and Libra. And Aries is in the simplest way, the I am energy, right? It's like we are born into this world. It's the first sign of the astrological zodiac. And so we are born into this world as individuals. Who am I? What is my relationship with myself? It's a bit of a fiery masculine energy, a bit of a warrior type energy. Like I'm coming out. There's impulse. You can think of like the seed just making its way through and that energy of pushing on through for life, right? So there's that's happening. But Libra is ruled by Venus. It's all about love and relationship and balance and reciprocity and justice and how we relate to one another and how we relate to the stars and the earth and the moon and our gardens and our bodies and the food we eat. And so it's all about relating to others. And so we have this really beautiful kind of conversation happening right now. Last week, there was a bit of an uncomfortable moment when Venus came into conjunction with Chiron And conjunction means, from our perspective on Earth, they look like they're right next to each other. And Chiron is an asteroid that represents the wounded healer. So you have this planet of love and beauty and abundance
Mm.
coming to the wounded healer. And so, like, your wounds around love and around abundance and security, all that is going to be inflamed in Aries, which is quite fiery. So not an easy place to be in, and probably bringing up questions around, like, how can I make this more fair? How can I make this more balanced? How can I? So in my
Mm.
full moon circle today, these were questions that we were journaling around. These were rituals that we were working with, right? And then, but the most beautiful thing, so that was last week. And so we're coming out of that. And on Monday, Venus stepped into Taurus. And Taurus is like Venus's favorite queendom, right? Because Taurus is like all about pleasure and sensuality and like enjoying life and abundance, the abundance of the earth, right? It's a very tactile sign. And so Venus is
Mm-hmm.
in her glory. So she's come out of this difficult situation into this wonderful situation where she has the support of Jupiter, which is in Cancer and which is squaring this, to really be in her power as she figures out how to navigate more justice, more balance, more reciprocity, more abundance in her relationship with self and life. So it's actually an incredible, incredible time.
Yeah, it's like it's the birth of the matriarchy, right? It just feels like this is what we get to do now, and what a ripe full moon to just go soak it in and
Yes.
bathe in it in all the ways. It's funny, I was listening to you talk, and I actually, one of my daughters is a Libra and one of my daughters is a Taurus. The other is Aquarius. Yeah, but I was just like listening to your context in the story, and then I could just hear so much of them through what you were sharing as well. It's so interesting. And for somebody who's just an astrology junkie, you gave a very, really good coverage of what's happening out there right now.
I just reiterate what other people say and weave it together,
Mm,
but your daughters will feel it. My daughter's also a Libra, and she is totally feeling it, but in a beautiful
mm,
way. I mean, astrology is always there to serve us, even if it takes us through the mud.
mm,
But yeah, I love what you said about the birth of the matriarchy. Exactly. So all the astrology leading up to now, and those outer planets that we're talking about, like a revolution and a change in a global system. And we're not talking like these
mhm.
things take time, and we know this.
Yeah, yeah.
But to have the support of Venus right now, definitely all about the matriarchy. And this is spring, like it's a time for newness.
Mhm. And yeah, and it is exciting, right? And it is, uh, it can be scary, it can be exciting, it can be all the things, right? So, like you said, it takes a little bit of that fortitude to break through the ground as a seed, and maybe you're not even sure what's on the other side. So that part could feel like very liberating and also maybe a little bit scary as we learn and navigate showing up in a different way or showing up in a new, unexpected way. And then even if it is exciting and it all feels good, right? And then we start going and, towards summer and all the ways that we sometimes do burn ourselves out, kind of like I just caught myself doing, right? I'm feeling a little bit disembodied, even though I know what I know and I have the tools, right? And I think just, you mentioning that, even in the healing journey and hosting your full moon, your moon circles, just remembering that it's about community. We cannot do this alone. It's so critical that we find our communities of women and leaders and people that keep us and hold us and remind us to slow down so that we can hear ourselves, so that we can stay embodied, so that we can connect that wisdom. Yeah. Just wondering if you had anything helpful to say around that too, because you've got so much. It feels like so palatable right now, what's coming through you.
I feel like the somatic piece is really important,
Hmm.
and that in these moments, we can speak to right now, but I also want to speak to like the dark moons. But
Hmm.
in these moments of these sort of full moon moments, it's a really great time to do some shaking, maybe, or to do some journaling and imagine that as you're writing out, for instance, what you're ready to release, like just to imagine it coming out of your body as you're writing it out, and then to imagine it burning. If you can burn it, then definitely burn it. But if you're going to shake it out of your system, imagine it burning out of your system as you actually take 3, 4, 5 minutes to shake, And then should you choose to use these full moons to step into another version of yourself, to really release, listen to the wisdom that's coming in around what you need to take on moving forward, or who you are embodying, the version of yourself that you're embodying moving forward, to again practice walking the way that woman walks, practice dancing and moving the way that woman moves, right? Like to really imprint, we've used the word imprint, but really imprint into your cells who that new version of yourself is. And so I think that question around what we can do, I feel like we often, and again, this is patriarchal conditioning, like we often say to ourselves, well, if I can't do the full-fledged retreat, 3-day retreat, or if I can't, do like the 3-hour ceremony, or if I can't build the massive bonfire, then why bother, right? But it doesn't have to be that complicated. I think it's important that we do it in circle sometimes when we can. And that's why 13 Moons exists, my membership. But, it can be as simple as just journaling for 10 minutes, ripping up that piece of paper, either burning it in an ashtray or flushing it down the toilet, putting on your favorite music, and just really feeling into your power, sensuality, and pleasure. And there's 10 minutes, right? It doesn't need to be complicated. I love, love, love the idea. And I used to do this when I lived in Brazil of building a fire under the moon and then dancing around that fire. Of course, it's ideal, right?
Yes.
But we don't have to do that every time.
But wouldn't it be nice if we did? Gosh.
Yes. Yes, it would.
I think something is interesting for me right now, because probably just where I am in my own journey, is when you talk about feminine power and feminine pleasure and the way that the two are actually intertwined, often are separated, right? We're seen as pleasure as maybe as a nice to have, or pleasure is something down the road, or pleasure is frivolous and not for me, but yet it's so intertwined in feminine energy and feminine power. And the way that the patriarchy has removed it from us in a way as sinful and shameful. And I don't even just mean in a sexual context and in an orgasmic context. I mean also as just in pleasure. Like you said, you could take pleasure in ripping up that letter, or in the way that flower smells, or in just the way you apply moisturizer in the morning, right? We have all these senses: touch, smell, taste, food, drink, tea, all the ways we can infuse pleasure into our practice to embody that power and that wisdom and just bring that intuition and that conversation with our body, right? When you're talking about that embodiment piece, just brings it all online. I feel like it just turns up the volume of it a little bit more. And yet it sounds almost counterintuitive to even say that when there's so much happening in the world, right? When we are seeking justice, when we are trying to right so many wrongs, and how dare we take time for that? And so I am just curious what your thoughts are on that, because I haven't found a great explanation for this, although I deeply believe it in my core and know it to be true.
Yeah.
But I have a really difficult time trying to articulate it. So we might not come up with the best way right now, but I do want to add that to the conversation and would love your thoughts.
I think it's super important, Lisa. Super important.
Yeah.
Like you said, take time for pleasure. You can't rush pleasure, right? You have to have time to stop and smell the flower, right? If you're really going to enjoy the bath, it's not going to be a rushed moment, right? So and the capitalist system that we live in has conditioned us, has trained us, has educated us to become units of production. and to optimize that production, which means, as we've alluded to, go, 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 eternal summers, right? Like, don't take that time to rest and slow down. In addition to that, we've got like the whole institutionalized religion piece that has demonized
Mm-hmm.
a woman's pleasure and taken away, basically given our reproductive capacity to a system where all our value, our worth is around creating new units of capitalist production, new humans. Right. And so I think that to take pleasure back, to reclaim it, is it's a radical act.
Mm.
Right? It's a revolutionary act to do that. There's actually a book written by Adrienne Murray Brown, who's like one of my favorite authors, called Pleasure Activism. It's a dense book. I haven't read it in its entirety, but the entire premise is that taking pleasure for ourselves is a revolutionary act. And so, it does feel counterintuitive because we feel like like, there's no fucking around now. We have got to get
Mm-hmm.
this thing sorted. But do you remember when we were on retreat with Lupita? So
Mm-hmm.
just to give context to your listeners, Lupita is a grandmother of the lineage of the land where we were on in Mexico, and she gave us a beautiful cacao ceremony. And one of the things she said was, in 4 generations is when we will begin to see this. We cannot rush this change. We cannot use the tools of the patriarchy to build something new. And the tools of the
Mm-hmm.
patriarchy are to rush and to hustle and to push. We need to align ourselves with the rhythms, the organic rhythms of nature, if we're going to create something sustainable. But because our
Mm-hmm.
nervous systems are so familiar and comfortable, and because our minds believe that it's so necessary to push through to get it done, then we so easily fall into that way of being and doing, instead of really tuning in to an organic rhythm that has space for pleasure. Does that make
I
sense?
love that. Oh my gosh. Yes, I had full body chills the whole time you were talking. Pleasure as a rebellion is
Mm.
pleasure activism. That rings so true. To take back our life force energy is really what that is, right?
Mhm.
Take back that power, that life force energy. This is what fuels us. And it is what will inform the way we do what we do, to create from that place of life, of that place of life force energy and regenerative systems that will sustain us, that will outlast us.
Yeah. I mean,
Ooh,
it's no
I love
it's no
that.
accident that the orgasm is so incredibly pleasurable and is
Mm,
also the moment that life is created,
yeah.
right? Like, the epic moment of pleasure is the moment of creation of life.
Mm, mm-hmm.
I think that it's a metaphor, I
Yeah.
think, but like, I think that when we need to know a truth, or when we, instead of kind of sitting and like forcing ourselves to figure it out at our desk, it's more likely
Mm-hmm.
to come if we do something pleasurable for ourselves. That's when our bodies speak to us. That's when our
Mm-hmm.
ancestors speak to us, is when our nervous systems are, we're in a parasympathetic state, and we're capable of listening.
Yeah. I think that's really the key, is just being able to listen right now, maybe until we know what the heck we're doing. Because like you, I also get like that. We gotta go birth the matriarchy. Get your swords, I'm ready to lead the charge. Just point me in a direction, right? Because that feminine rage is real, right? Like, it is is getting activated multiple times a day, and it's almost like it's just ready for one more, injustice. I'm ready for every comeback. You say, I'm so ready to just like tear this thing down and to prove it wrong and to build something new and to say no more and to hold this line and also don't want to just repeat the same things, right? Not about revenge, but about justice and about building something new and something that does last. So I find myself doing a little bit of some version of this dance to come back to myself, come back to home, come back to clarity, come back to what really matters in this moment every time I find myself becoming activated to try and discern what's mine to stand on and what's mine to hold while still honoring this body that I am in.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
I can do that.
I think, the rage piece is really important, Lisa, because we can't talk about pleasure and ecstasy without acknowledging the rage. And again, that's something that's been taken away from us. So, but I think key with the rage piece is that we are so allowed to feel it. It is so justified, and we can't let it take us over. So there's something about learning how to alchemize what's coming at us, and there's so much fucking shit coming at us. What's coming at us, process it through our bodies, and allow for it to fuel without holding onto it, but alchemize it into fuel that will support our action. So we could be angry for a really fucking long time. It's such a good thing that we are not vengeful. Because if we were vengeful, like pissed off is one thing, but vengeful is another. And it's such a good thing we're not vengeful. And we also, if we were vengeful and if we held on to that rage, who would we really be harming in the end?
Yeah.
Right? Because the matriarchy is all about love. So we cannot hold on to that. We are so allowed to feel it, and it so belongs there. And it's an important fuel, but we need to be able to process it through and out of our system so that it doesn't cause harm to us or the people that we're building the matriarchy for. And that includes the men, because men have not been served by the patriarchy.
No, exactly. Thank you for bringing that to the conversation. It hasn't really benefited them either, although it may appear that way. It hasn't.
No. I mean, they appear that way because of the definitions that we all live within, right? But in terms of like health and showing up whole and all those things that make for a truly content and joyful life.
Yeah. Gosh, I feel like time flies when I am talking with you. And I hate to even try to wrap up this conversation because I feel like we are just starting to scratch the surface of it. But I will. Maybe we need to do a part 2. But I would love to just before we close, see what else is on your heart today. If there's anything else you want to share or final thoughts, and then we can let our listeners know how to find you.
Gosh, I don't know what to add. It's been such a beautiful conversation. We've really spoken about so many things, and I hope that your listeners will take away something, not only in terms of, understandings, but also maybe some practices that can support them, some ideas.
Yeah.
I don't know. Thank you so much for having me, Lisa. It's just such a pleasure to connect with you in any way, and really a delight to have a nice conversation like this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I did think of something before we completely close out, just to also bring this maybe to the next episode of when we slow down, when we're able to start to really hear ourselves and bring back that wisdom of the matriarchy that's been silenced, as you mentioned before, for generations, right? and allowing that to tap into some of our ancestral wisdom and back in time when women did live in community, when that worked well for them, when they were allowed to. Like, I don't even, very rarely will you find places in history that even talk about that and make space for that as we reclaim even women's circles and our own wisdom and our life force energy. If you could just touch on that connection a little bit here. And I know it's not really fair to ask that as we're closing out because it's such a long, winding road, but I also know it's very much a part of the work that you do.
I believe that our ancestors are cheering us on right now. I
Mm-hmm.
believe that I shouldn't say, I actually think this is true for male and female ancestors, that they're really excited about what's going on and that we can hear them again when we pause and when we go quiet. And they're waiting for us to listen. They're waiting for us to reach out. I say this, I say I believe it, but I also have experienced it in my own ancestral healing work. And I know that you have too. So there are, again, in the world that we live in, we think that we're kind of these individuals doing it on our own at worst.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Next step, we're in a human circle with other women and we can hold hands and we can do it together. Yes. Yes, we are. But
Mm-hmm.
there's more. There is an entire, and again, like Indigenous wisdom speaks to this, there is a whole unseen world of ancestors who are like, if we're the inner circle, they have our back in an outer circle. Like for us to
Mm-hmm.
lean back into, for us to ask questions, guidance, they hold their traumas and we hold their blessings in ourselves. Even like scientifically, that is
Mm-hmm.
proven. And so we can draw on that as we choose to move forward. So there's just, I think I would say that, and if you look at kind of animist cultures across time and space, that really the most important lesson is that we are not alone.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is
Yeah.
interconnected in this 3D realm, but then there's another realm. And they're so
Mm-hmm.
excited for us right now.
I love that. I love, love, love that. What a beautiful way to end this. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for being here with me today, Alexandra. We're going to leave lots of links in the show notes, her resources for cyclical living, how to find her on social media and her website, and more to come. Thank you so, so much, Alexandra.
Thank you, Lisa. It's such a pleasure.